Who said I think therefore I am? That's not Billie Eilish because that song gets stuck in my
Mm,
head every
is
time I
it?
hear it. And I'm not mad at it, but like earworm. Welcome to Let's Pick This Up Next Week. I'm Dee.
And I'm DJ. We're two therapists who like to dive deep into everything from mental health to politics, voting, and whatever else is going on in the world.
We're here to have real conversations about life, the issues that matter, and how it all affects us. Because let's face it, there's always something more to talk about.
Exactly. So grab your coffee, settle in, and join us as we break it all down.
We'll catch you up on the big stuff, the personal stuff, and the things you didn't even know that you needed to think about.
And when we run out of time,
we'll pick this up next week. DJ, in your view, what does it mean to have a sense of identity? Like, who are we? What is that? What is that?
It's interesting that you asked that, Dee, because my view, I think, is different than a lot of people because I can approach identity with curiosity. I think because my identity has changed and evolved so much like over my life.
It's true.
But
Yeah.
yeah, I think that a lot of people feel very, very strong in their beliefs, and any thing that challenges their beliefs, I think, can become a threat to their identity, as in, if that's not who they are, then who are they?
Exactly. Right. Because it's something that's so like identity is the most personal thing we have. That it's like who makes us
Mhm.
us, right? And if you believe behaviorists say that we are born as blank slates and the people we are truly just a culmination of us interacting with our environment, learning information, and then going from
Mhm.
there. I like the idea of behaviorists, but not all of the
Mhm.
way. There's a lot of genetics and
Mhm.
that kind of stuff that goes into it. But our sense of identity is we are a culmination of all the experiences we've ever had. And
Mhm.
sometimes we forget that other people have different experiences. And
Right.
therefore, their sense of identity looks a lot different than ours, even when we think something should be super commonplace, you know?
That's interesting. Number one, the first thing that you're like, about behaviorists, because like I
I
would
am
tell anybody
behaviorism.
that I am for sure a behaviorist at my core. But because not only do I use a lot of concepts from DBT, in my practice as a clinician, but I practice those concepts in my life.
Mm,
And I knew that like I can be a behaviorist and like know that that's not the totality of everything. And there's room for other pieces in there because I can hold more than one thing at once. And you saying like behaviorist doesn't feel like a threat to my identity. It makes me feel curious because I can be like, it's not everything. You're right.
ooh.
Like genetics and environment, and there's so many environment that like is even outside of like just behavior that like really,
Mm-hmm.
you know, impacts us. So yeah.
Yeah, like our sense of identity comes from like who we are, what we value, the world, how we view the world as working, but it also comes
Hmm.
from like our family systems, our sense of beliefs, and like not to get too like whatever into it because we're really going to talk about like what happens when your identity feels ruptured and we learn things that
Hmm.
threaten our sense of identity. But like there's only so much part of identity that you see. So if you think about the lovely iceberg, listeners, we see certain things on the
Right.
top of the iceberg. We can see how someone looks, we can see how someone carries themselves, we can see who they surround themselves with, we can see those things, but there's so much more under the surface that you truly can't see.
Right.
Many of us don't even know ourselves well enough to know what's all in that iceberg.
Exactly. And what's so fascinating to me as again as a clinician, and the more and more that I work with people who have like core beliefs about themselves, right? That like, where those come from and how they are established and how hard those are to change.
Mm-hmm.
But also, the more and more I work with people, the more and more I'm surprised that we can communicate with each other at all. Because communication is so influenced by the way that you navigate the world and the way
Mm-hmm.
that you perceive the world and the way that and what meaning you have created about things that are tied to again like your identity and who you are. And it's so everybody's experiences are so different. that it is so
Hmm.
surprising to me that like everyone's just not assuming the wrong thing all the time, and that we're able to communicate like at all. And that does become more complicated, we see on like social media or text messages, emails. Well, if you don't emails anymore, but like that sort of thing is that like we're not emailing to our friends frequently, but
No, we're using
you know,
GIFs and
right.
memes.
Yeah.
I'm a
Right.
millennial. That's how I communicate.
Right. Right. And thinking about like even if we identify as like what is it, neurotypical or depending on if you're comparing it to like autistic people, they say like autistic versus
Hmm.
autism, like neurotypical people versus neurodiverse people or introverts versus extroverts, right? Like
Yeah.
everybody is experienced in the world based differently on that, like how what feels comfortable for them, and
Hmm.
we process information so differently. And neurotypical people like make a lot more assumptions than neurodiverse people who are questioning everything. And like that is so, how did you get to that conclusion? And why does that conclusion make sense? Because I don't think that conclusion does make sense. So there's so many things that like how we're navigating the world. And I just listed a bunch of things that people identify with, right? Part of my
Hmm.
identity could be like I'm an extrovert. That's not me, but like, or I'm an
Opposite.
a neurotypical person, and like I can keep going because the more and more I see how we get like our arguments, like cisgender versus transgender, and I've heard like cisgender
Hmm.
people be like, "Don't call me that, like that's a slur," and like where it's like a term that was created in like biology, but to some people
Hmm.
it feels like, I'm just a person and you're saying anyway. There's so many things that like people get upset about because again, what it sounds like we're saying about our identity.
Well, yeah, because um, it's simultaneous, like in that example, right? Like it would seem to be like, oh, I would be reaching and helping this person define their identity, but it doesn't
Right,
correspond with their identity. Like
right.
most people who aren't trans don't think about their gender identity. We've seen that in
Yeah.
both the research that we've done and the presentations we do, like that more subjective research, so to speak, of when we talk about gender and we talk about sexuality. We often ask people, when did you start to think about your gender identity? And some people, they never have, right? And not that that's
Mhm.
like, that's certainly just one piece of identity,
Mhm.
but when you're not used to something being a part of who you are and then someone puts that on you, like, if you have a set of beliefs and someone says, well, if you believe these things, then you're racist. If you believe these things, then you're sexist. If you believe these
Mhm.
things, first off, those are fighting words. Like, that's never going to
Mhm.
be a good place to meet, and have a
Mhm.
good dialogue. But it's like it doesn't fit with your experience, so therefore it is wrong.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, and that's interesting because like the way that I separate those things
My
about
eyes, for
like
anyone watching like the video, my eyes are just
your
watering. Sorry,
eyes
I'm like
are
sobbing
very
witness. I'm
watery.
so sorry.
I
I'm
know.
so drying out the longer we're
Mhm.
here. I gotta get eye
Yeah,
drops.
yeah. We did talk for a good 45 minutes before we started
Yeah.
recording. So,
Anyway.
yeah, so anyway, how I look at these things, like you said, sexist and racist and that kind of things. And when I approach those topics, I think that if I stick to the facts, like let me give you a definition of what racism is and come from it from a place of fact. Like this is what racism is. This is,
Hmm.
something I would think that you don't want to be. And so, like, let me approach it from, like, this is the information, this is what it is. And, like, let's talk about, like, how not to be that way. But people still, if something there feels like it's tied to their identity, even though they know they don't want to be a racist, like, they really struggle with, like, how do they move from a place that's being perceived in that way. But,
Hmm.
like, a lot of people grow up for racism or sexism with ideas that they don't know that that's what those ideas might be. Like they're
Hmm.
those things. So it becomes this is my belief system. And now you're saying that it is. And the thing is that like when people's identity, when there's something that they apply to themselves, whatever the beliefs are, and it doesn't cause harm to another person, then that's not problematic. but the racism or sexist racist, like if there is something in your belief system that exists in a way that could be harmful to another person, that is problematic because
Hmm.
we have inherent rights, I believe. But in those inherent rights, we don't get to hurt other people and then justify
Hmm.
it. If that's a part of your identity, as if someone is saying to you, this is hurtful to me, to this group, to whatever, like, I think people would be willing to be open to those conversations, to be like, I don't want to be that. But people automatically, when it feels like an identity rupture, I grew up with these
Hmm.
beliefs. Nobody told me
Yep.
these beliefs were racist or sexist or whatever. And this is a part of who I am. And now you're calling me this. I am going to, not me, but like a person,
Sure.
if it's an identity feels like an identity threat. People are it feels like an attack. It feels like their nervous system activates. They
Hmm.
feel danger, danger, danger. And it's hard to get to a place to be open to conversation because the automatic thing is I don't hear what you're saying to me. I don't hear your facts. I hear you telling me I am wrong or bad. So danger,
Hmm.
danger, danger. Or there's something wrong with my identity and it is met with defensiveness and not let me be open to this conversation because it's
Yeah.
automatically an identity threat because we are wired as humans to see that as a an attack in your nervous system in your brain respond in that way first.
Yeah, absolutely. Like when we, so first it's like that defensiveness hurdle. And even if it's
Mhm,
like, I don't know, even if it's well meaning. So, for example, I was talking to a friend the other day and he said something like, oh, he's got to follow up with his doctor or something. And I
mhm,
said, well, what's he got to say about this? Like, what's your doctor have to say? And I said, he, without thinking, this was like a cardiologist or something,
mhm,
pointed out my unconscious bias because
mhm,
then
I
he
do
goes,
that.
oh, he, of course, it actually
Mhm,
was a dude, but my
mhm,
friend pointed it out to me to check me on that unconscious bias. And of course, I wanted
mhm,
to just be like, well, I thought it was the doctor you told me about. And I had wanted to rationalize all these reasons why I'm
right,
not misogynistic or whatever. But what I said
right.
was a misogynistic comment. So,
Because,
what
right,
even,
that is something, a belief that you grew up with and applied it to
Mhm.
your meaning making without thinking that, like, that is assuming that other people are. So you defend it even though you are not a
Yeah,
misogynist, and like you still feel that need to defend because like
for
this is a
sure.
belief system that you grew up with, and the meaning that doctor had to you was he, because I
Well,
used
and
to be that
even
way.
though and even though like I have plenty of evidence to contrary, my own
Hmm.
cardiologist is a woman.
Right.
So I like, you know what I mean? And I don't think any type of way, but
Mhm,
because it was just, this is a so ingrained and
mhm,
automatic, oh, we're talking about a highly specialized doctor. Therefore, we must be talking about a person who looks like this. Like, and it
mhm,
was so ingrained because that's how I grew up. So
without even right,
when we're challenging people to rethink these things,
mhm,
we're challenging them to think about, if I accept this thing, then who do I become if I'm accepting this thing? If I'm accepting
mhm,
that, if I will say something like the Super Bowl should be in English or they whatever, if I accept that people who say that struggle to, whatever, I'm going to say struggle with recognizing that American values don't just mean English, right?
mhm,
But when that threatens me as a person, who will I become? If you're saying I have this belief and you're saying that this belief is racist, what does that mean for me? Who am I now
mhm,
that I hold this
right.
belief and you're telling me this belief is whatever, ist here?
Right. And it does become more problematic when it's those heated things because
Hmm.
sexism, racism, again, are beliefs that can cause harm to other people. So it's going to
Yep.
escalate that whole conversation. But interestingly too, is the thing that always like I find so curious is that it's the cancellation that happens.
Mm,
It's not like you can some a lot of times, like again, if it's an identity rupture happening, a lot of
yep.
times that's not like a some thing like you can add it to. So like, okay, so if this person exists, this other way. Like, I think because it's an easy example, like religion, maybe easy, but like because I think it's clear, it can be clear to like where our differences is. So if I
Hmm.
believe this thing because of my religion, and I believe that is the truth, the absolute truth. That like, whatever it is that I grew up with that was Catholic or whatever, like that feels like
Sure.
core to me, the absolute truth of like this is how you live your life. These are the things that happen to you, after you die. These are the things that govern you, that kind of thing. And then I meet somebody else who is like a different religion. Like if I'm Catholic and I meet someone who's Jewish or something, right? And they have way different system of
Hmm.
belief. And I believe, I'm told that like I have to follow the system of belief in order to get to an afterlife that is favorable to me. And someone comes along and they have a different belief system with different things that they have to follow in order to have a favorable afterlife or whatever, plus all the things that happen in the middle. But that's a big, big deal.
Hmm.
Like if people are like, this is what I have to do to get to heaven, or this is what I have to do to whatever my afterlife belief is,
Yeah.
if that if that's my belief and you come along and you have a different belief that is completely, framed differently, and I'm like, wait a second, if you're doing that and I'm doing this, one of us has to be wrong or bad. Both can't be right, because if this is my belief about this is the one thing that exists
Hmm.
in an afterlife, and this is what I have to do, and you're doing
Yeah.
something that is completely different, then it's not a something that I'm not automatically going to be like, oh, I can do this and you can do that and we can both be right, because it doesn't
Hmm.
feel like that. It feels like one of us has to be right and one of us has to be wrong.
Because they're
And
conflicting.
so,
Yeah.
right, because they conflict. And so it's that idea that if you have a conflicting, I like that you pointed that out. If you have a conflicting belief system,
Hmm.
how can my belief system still stand? And again, like my belief system is who I am at my
Hmm.
core. It does not feel safe. I don't feel safe anymore. What if I automatically am like, great, now I'm going to the bad afterlife
Yeah.
because because um
The
because
bad
you've got
place.
the bad place, right? Opposite the good place TV show. Anyway, right? So it doesn't feel like the two things can exist at the same, like
Hmm.
if that identity rupture is happening first, like how
Yeah.
do you navigate that? I mean, it takes a lot of work and a lot of practice to
Hmm.
be able to be like, these two things can exist at the same
Hmm.
time. One doesn't have to be wrong or bad or good or right, and like you just do the best that you can with the knowledge that you have and live your life, but you don't easily get there.
No, and especially when it's something that's that personal,
Mhm.
things like
Right.
religion and spirituality, those are some of the most, our political affiliation, our, beliefs
Mhm.
around family and, I did like those are all such core parts of our identity.
Mhm.
They're so deeply ingrained. They cause that much more of a response, a reaction.
Mhm. Yeah.
But when we feel that, not only is it dissonance, and I want to talk for a moment about cognitive dissonance, but it also
Mhm.
feels like an attack. So, like, the attack's the hard thing. We
Mhm.
unfortunately live, and we've done an episode about this already. About we are in a time where everything feels like an attack if it's not agreement. So
Right.
if you don't agree with me, you are attacking my belief system. You are a threat to my belief system. And to your earlier point, when we as humans feel that, we are hardwired, our sympathetic nervous system
Mhm.
turns on and we're on attack mode. Like that's
Firefly.
how our bodies deal with threats. Fight, flight, fawn, or freeze, right? Those are
Yeah.
the four most
Mhm.
common responses to a threat. If we could get past the attack, and I think unfortunately people tend to be more inflammatory. If I had to guess why, it's because we live in a world where we get information at 1,000 miles per hour. And so
Yeah,
it's just quick initial
exactly.
responses. Like you made a Facebook post, like having like insightful conversations. And I was about to comment, and then I'm like, I don't have the capacity for this. And I
Mhm.
know that I would become defensive and that's it. You know what I mean? So
Mhm.
anyway, so we struggle right now to get past that. Everything feels like an attack. And then if we could, then you have to sit with the cognitive dissonance of
Mhm.
what you've learned and how it
Right.
interacts with your values and your identity.
Right, exactly. And in our brains, in order to like kind of be like the safety mechanism will simplify things to black or white. And
Yep.
so, like, it is like,
Yep.
all or nothing, bad or good. And then, like, how do you move through it? Because in fast fight or flight, especially, you're not going through and using all of your higher level cognitive skills.
Hmm.
You're in the like black or white. Let me get through this. I have to get safe again. And it's one thing or the other, and that's it. And
Yeah.
so it takes a lot of practice. And again, like, I feel fortunate in that like I've used DBT, dialectical behavior therapy as a model, and that
Hmm.
really is about being able to hold two opposing truths at the same time. And I have learned to like put it into practice in my life that, but not always. I mean, I'm not perfect. My fight or flight will get activated and I definitely can get defensive too. But I do have more capacity now to meet things with curiosity and really be open to like I can have a lot of dialogue that I know that will be hard for other people, and I know that because other people tell me that. And because I have more capacity to meet differences with curiosity. And I want to
Yeah.
be able to, like, let's have a conversation. And I feel like I can hold it longer than the other person can. And that, like, I know that I hear you, you're uncomfortable and you're getting angry. And I am still here holding the space for, like, I'm hoping
Hmm.
we can get to a place of, like, there's some common ground here somewhere because we all have common ground somewhere, you know.
Absolutely. We have more common than uncommon ground, honestly. We truly do.
And the thing is that like I can hold that space longer. I'll hit my limit too, and like I got to tap out because you're not willing. I'll just tap
Yep.
out. I'm not going to keep going because like I see that like you are not in a place where you
Hmm.
can also try and meet me here. I'm trying to bring you here. And if you can't, then like, I get it. It's hard because again, the
Yep.
identity ruptures and all that stuff, and you feel at threat. It's not easy to be able to like have that
Yep.
capacity. And I know that it took a lot of work for me to get here because I was a person in my life who used to wear a t-shirt that said, everyone is entitled to my opinion and believed it. Like I was not
Amazing.
right? I was not always a person who had the capacity to be able to, but also you're no one else is going to automatically assume that I am trying to hold that capacity and we're going to have this
Sure.
conversation. I'm a threat no matter what. And so, first I'm a threat and maybe you might come back to it and be like, let me examine this, but probably not. And
Hmm.
I understand that. And it hurts, like, because I'm
Hmm.
like, man, it doesn't have to be this way, but
Yeah.
also I know that we are hardwired for threat, react, threat,
Yep.
react, and it really does take a lot of mindful work, like actual practice
Hmm.
on how can I bend away from that. And again, like in a moment, you know, it's not easy.
Oh, for
If like
sure.
anything that feels threatened at first, it takes a minute to be able to like jump back and re-engage. And sometimes
Hmm.
like, you know, it takes work. I don't think people
Yeah.
automatically have that. It really takes like practicing as if you're learning a new instrument or something harder.
It's and it's 100% that's backed by our brain, right? So when we think about
Mhm,
areas of the brain responsible for those things, we have the limbic system, which is one of our
mhm,
earliest. We've had our limbic system for every animal has a limbic system to various degrees, and that's what controls our
mhm,
fight, flight, fawn, or freeze. That's what controls our threat response. Some people wrongly say like the amygdala is like the fear center of the brain. Really, it's the
mhm.
heightened awareness sense of the brain. Like it
Right.
controls a lot and not just fear. So we have that. That's the part of our brain we defer to. That is the easiest, like, that is,
Yeah.
that's just the easiest part of our brain to defer to. Where this, like, higher level thinking of being able to sit with a thought and to not necessarily agree or disagree with it. I think that was Aristotle. I think Aristotle said, it's the
Mhm,
mark of an educated mind to sit with a thought and not agree with it. I can't remember exactly how he said. He didn't say
mhm.
sit with, maybe. I'm gonna look it up here in a minute because I have to get it right. But
Right.
to um, to sit with that really sits in that prefrontal cortex area of the brain, which
Mhm,
is the part of our brain that when people say like, "Oh, you don't fully develop a brain until 25," that's
mhm,
kind of a misnomer. But that's talking about that higher level prefrontal cortex area of
mhm,
the brain, and it's a muscle that gets weaker over time. So if you're not consistently
Mhm.
trying to practice thinking differently, sitting with dissonance, like thinking through things, that area of your brain gets a bit weaker, but the limbic system will never get weaker. The limbic system will always
Right.
operate at what it thinks to be the best and most helpful, not necessarily.
Right. Exactly.
But so it's this war of the brain.
Hmm. And to your point about the prefrontal cortex, is that like that's also the part of your brain, so it doesn't fully develop until we're like 25-ish, right? And
Mm-hmm.
that's one of my favorite things to say to 26-year-olds is like, congratulations, you have a fully developed brain. But the fact of the matter is that is the part of the brain that is most impacted by trauma, and a lot of other
Mm-hmm.
things too. But like trauma is the thing. So if you had any and complex trauma, which is like ongoing,
Mm-hmm.
so a lot of people will say we've talked about this in other episodes about people who are like, I don't have a big T trauma. Like trauma can be like building up over
Yeah,
time, right?
sure.
And or it can be like, oh, a plane crash or something. But
Yeah.
the fact of the matter is that is the part of the brain that is affected by substance abuse and trauma, and again by other things.
Yep.
So like a lot of people don't get that fully developed part of their brain and are able to process it, not to any fault of their own, but
Mm-hmm.
because like something has harmed that. And even
Yeah.
substance abuse, right? Like people don't abuse substances because, it's a good time. A lot of times people, I mean, they can, but, and I say that as
But
a recovering alcoholic, but, it's a maladaptive coping strategy. And it's fun
mm-hmm.
for a reason because of the fact that like there's,
Yep.
that's the time that you can escape from a lot of things that you're not able to fully process, right? So it's not easy. It's not easy to get up in that free
Yeah.
prefrontal cortex. And again, like you said, like it can get weaker over time, but also it has to be
Mm-hmm.
built up. And that's the part that
Yep.
you're like, doing barbells for your prefrontal frontal cortex. You have to do that work in order to be able to have the capacity to sit with something that is an identity threat.
Yep.
It's
Exactly.
wild.
Otherwise, neuronal pruning takes hold,
Hmm.
which is fascinating. Your brain literally just stops paying attention to some neurons. They get weaker over time and stop working. So these
Hmm.
connections in your brain get weaker over time.
Right.
Um, the quote for the record, it's commonly attributed to Aristotle. And it is the mark of an educated mind to be able to entertain a thought without accepting it.
Right.
Don't know who actually said it, but people say it's Aristotle, so I'm going to say it might be
Hmm.
Aristotle.
Hmm. Yeah. Yeah. It's
But
fascinating.
people tend to respond to that rupture, right? And by rupture, I know we said it a few times, but I can't recall if we said it kind of before we started recording or after. But that rupture is truly when something is introduced that threatens your identity, that feels like it doesn't align with what you know to be true from your own experiences, right?
Right. Right. Yes.
Like I had a client tell me one time, this was early. I know I've shared the story on a podcast before. Early in my career, I had a client who drank a lot. And when I said, hey, that's not like normal, right? I would never use the word normal talking to a client now. But I was like, hey,
Mm.
that's not what an average kind of normal person consumes for alcohol. And he said to me, well, my dad drinks this much, my grandpa drinks this much, my uncles drink this much, my brothers drink this much. How dare you tell me that's not normal when it's
Hmm.
all I see around me, right? So
Right.
I created this threat to his identity by suggesting
Hmm.
people
Right.
don't drink a case a day. Like that's not
Right.
statistically what most people do. But there's three main ways that people tend to respond. I'm sorry, I'm going to reference three different studies on why we respond the way that we do. The first is cognitive dissonance. We mentioned that a little bit. And people
Hmm.
tend to do three things when they feel cognitive dissonance. Dissonance being holding two things that don't resonate with one another, and it's
Hmm.
uncomfortable. We literally can't hold beliefs that conflict. It causes us
Right.
distress, right? But when we experience dissonance, we tend to do one of three things. We either reject the new information and just
Hmm.
decide that must not be right or disregard it. We rationalize, we make a truth to
Right.
squish that square peg into a round hole and make it work. Or the most difficult thing is to accept that information and therefore change parts of our identity.
Hmm.
That's the work people try to do in therapy. Like, that's the hard
Yeah.
stuff right there.
Hmm. That is the hard stuff as a therapist, to help someone through that.
Right.
It does feel like you're lifting weights.
Getting that mental pump on for
Hmm.
sure.
Yeah.
But also in counseling and psychotherapy, we talk about identity and narrative psychology. Some people use narrative therapy, which part of that is quite literally writing your story. I'm not a narrative
Hmm.
therapist. I can't speak super intelligently on it. I've never
Yeah.
used, other than having a client write their life story. I can't say I've
Right.
used too many interventions that fall into narrative psychology, but we experience life. We want to experience life as this coherent story. We want to be able to connect the things in our life and make sense of it all. Like, that's again part of how we're wired. We need to make sense of things.
Hmm.
So when we get new information that doesn't fit into the story that I
Hmm.
hold to be true, then it requires integration into the story that I thought was already pretty complete.
Hmm.
So
Yeah.
that's what narrative therapy has to say about this.
Hmm.
And it can also create moral injury. If we look at the research on moral injury, it's
Hmm.
common when we have new information that violates a deeply ingrained and deeply held belief. So when we're talking
Hmm.
about things like religion, spirituality, political, whatever affiliation, those things tend to be very ingrained. So those things can feel like part of our morals and part of our values. And to learn, you know, this is my political affiliation and this is what my political affiliation is doing, it doesn't ring true to me. That can cause a lot of, like, when we see people out there right now who are saying, Donald Trump, I voted for this person, but this isn't what I was promised. This isn't what I understood. This does not follow my values. That's a
Hmm.
person who's doing the prefrontal cortex work and recognizing that it's creating that sense of moral injury.
Right. And as someone strongly identifies with a movement that a
Mm-hmm.
president like created with like MAGA, right? That's a part of your becomes part of your identity. So it's
Yeah.
not as easy to be like, this guy is doing something that I don't necessarily agree with. It is that this guy is the guy who like is aligned with everything that I believe now, and
Mm-hmm.
it's harder to I want to trust that that person is telling me what is true, and I don't want to have
Yeah.
to uh not trust that, or think that like, I need to go and investigate something that has become such a big part of me. I don't feel like what you
Well,
say feels true if you say something
yeah.
opposite.
And it can lead to disenfranchisement of like
Hmm.
no longer feeling connected to what you thought you were connected to.
Right.
But
Right.
also, I mean, think about, we live in a system that is two party.
Hmm.
And so it's, you're either this or that. And so if something no
Right.
longer rings true, you
Hmm.
no longer have that sense of community of, like, to
Right.
use like the Make America Great Again, MAGA, whatever movement.
Hmm.
If you stop, if that's part of your identity, and then you start taking a step back to it, where do you belong? Because you, you sure don't agree with the other side,
Right.
but
Right.
recognizing like there is no other side, it's all a spectrum. We just
Right.
can't vote in a spectrum, unfortunately.
Uh,
Yeah. Yeah. So I think that makes it harder, especially in the divisive world we live in.
mhm.
It's because if I
Yeah.
lose, if I start to question, I no longer belong anywhere.
Right. And that's why, I sense of belongingness was a core principle in my dissertation. So it's something I've been
Mm-hmm.
extensively studying for a long time. And
Yeah.
that's why, like, when I approach like therapy, when I'm doing work with people, it's reminding people that, like, if you have this identity rupture, and
Mm-hmm.
if it doesn't seem to fit here, also it doesn't have to be an extreme. You can have boundaries there that are just like,
Yeah.
this is, I protect this part, I protect that part, this is how we can show up there still, if
Yep.
that's a system that I still want to participate in. But also, you have the choice to be like, you know what, this system doesn't fit me anymore. It doesn't
Mm-hmm.
mean that I don't belong anywhere. And again, that takes work. It doesn't mean that I don't belong anywhere. It means that, like, maybe I see where is a place that I might fit now better. Where's a place
Mm-hmm.
that like seems like, it's a more match for me. I have a theory, D, that I use a lot, that like in our common or current modern society, not talking about like evolutionary and all that kind of way of like why this shows up, but I brought this up before. We put kids into schools based
Oh
on
yeah.
because they live close to a building and then tell them this is where you have to fit in. And so they grow up thinking that you have to fit in where you are instead of looking for where you fit in and go there.
Hmm.
We're on, and
Yep.
again, like it depends on like what is the thing that you're identifying with most and how you're fitting in anyways. Because if we were fitting in based on interest and fitting in based on like other things, it's different. We can find a common ground, but a lot of times it's just we sort. We're programmed to
Hmm.
sort, and so we sort quickly and
Yep.
we sort simply, and
Yep.
and then it becomes problematic when you're doing it in a little building.
Yep. No,
Mhm.
absolutely. I think we are quick to, I hesitate to say like tribal because it feels like that's like a taken
Mhm.
language that's not mine to take. But we are a as people collectivistic, whatever I'm trying to
Yeah.
say. We want to
Mhm.
find our people, and
Yeah.
we'll
We
do
are
what we can
programmed
to
for
find
groupthink.
them.
Yeah. Mhm.
Yeah,
Yeah.
much better way of saying that. Thank you.
Mhm. Yeah. Yeah, but and then there are like ways that and I think that a lot of times like people don't think that there are ways that we do that that aren't
Hmm.
so divisive. I mean, it can some people get really, really big about who their team is, but like we can do things in a way that's like fun, and
Yeah.
that kind of stuff. And like this is a group that I belong to, because we all like these guys who play football. Or this is a group I belong to because we all like to do this thing together. Mean, people have like groups groups based on like sports that they play. Like this is my pickleball
Hmm.
people. Like there are a lot of places that we can fit in with people that we might not necessarily. If I go to play pickleball, I don't necessarily need to know what their political beliefs are. We like to
That's
play
true.
pickleball together, and while we're there, we're talking about pickleball, or we might talk about like something else that like a TV show that we all like or something like we can find ways to connect that doesn't have to feel so I don't
Yeah.
there's places that you just don't need to know. I don't need to sort if this is a place where we can find common ground, I don't need to sort politically. But a lot of people feel that threat that it's hard for them to be like, these are my pickleball buddies. I don't know what their political beliefs are. We don't talk about it. We're getting along and we're sharing space and we're doing
Yep.
it in a way I'm gonna give an example that like I think it's a moment that still when I think about it, I get teared up and not in a way where your body's doing it, but in a way that like it was such a huge deal. I went to I always say ABBA, I think it's ABBA, but the band, the Swedish
Okay.
band, right? The
Yeah.
the Mamma Mia. So in right, you moved your body because that's what they do. They make people move. I'm not a person
Yeah.
who dances, but like that's a band that makes me want to move. So
That's true.
right. So I went to they have like a show in England in London, I think. It was London. I went on a whole Europe trip in 2024. But
It's
I think it
amazing.
was
Yes.
England, and that's where they were. And so it's like holograms of them. And anyway, so it's a whole like concert. But in that place, there were people from every age, from every background, from everyone. I didn't know
Hmm.
anything else about these people except for we were all there because we liked this band. And everyone was singing and everyone was dancing. I still get choked up about it because I just looked around and like there are people from all over the world here who
Hmm.
have one thing in common. And in that space, we didn't care about anything else.
Hmm.
Nobody was asking the person next to them or behind them or two rows, like, wait a second, before we enjoy this together, what is your political beliefs? What is your
Yeah.
racial and ethnic background? What is your religion beliefs? Like, it didn't matter. What age are you?
Hmm.
Like, what generation are you from? Are you a boomer? Are you Gen X? Are you millennial? No, none of it mattered. I still like we just came together as
Yeah.
people who love the band and could enjoy an experience in a room. And that's what I think all the time, Rock.
Hmm.
First time I've cried on the podcast is that's what we can be. We
Yeah.
don't have to look at what is our differences. We can be in a
Hmm.
space and be like, we are all the same right now.
Yeah.
And that's what I feel like where we can get. Everyone, the moral of the story, Dave, is everyone needs to like this band. And it's one of my favorite bands. And I don't even know what the right way is to say it because I hear it both ways. But like,
Hmm.
the moral of the story is like we do it. There are places where this exists.
Yeah.
And like we just need to be able to be like to stop looking for differences. Everything isn't a threat. I'm not asking you questions or I might not like, see a difference, but we don't get to harm other people. Nobody gets
Hmm.
to do that. Nobody gets to say that like you're wrong and so bad because of your identity is different than mine. We don't get to
Yep.
say that I'm superior to you because I have an identity that looks different. Like, but we can
Hmm.
all learn how can we exist in harmony because there are places that we do it.
Yeah. Music is one of those, and maybe that's a future podcast, is talk about why psychologically music is one of those great unifiers.
Hmm.
We can all agree that we talk shit on Nickelback, but they're actually like a relatively decent band looking
They
back.
really are. I
They
never
didn't do
understand why
anything
people talk
wrong.
shit. I know I don't get it because they're one of my favorites.
They were
Yeah.
halfway decent, but if you liked Nickelback,
Hmm. Yeah.
anywho. But no, I think
Yeah.
that's a beautiful experience, and I think it really does show like we are so much more than what we currently are doing. Our
Hmm.
identity is greater than the division.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah. We can look for unifiers.
Yes. So, DJ, in closing, I'm curious, uh, if someone's in the middle of this identity rupture and they feel it, we feel it all the time, guys, by the way. We
Mhm.
just dismiss a lot of the dissonance real quick. What do you wish they knew about that experience?
I wish that they knew that like it's okay to react in the moment. And that
Hmm.
it doesn't mean that you're wrong or better. It doesn't mean that like it doesn't we get to create meaning. So we can react in the moment and we can learn to look at it and be like, "Oh, I felt something there. How about I examine it not from a place of like I have to be wrong or bad or they have to be wrong or bad. Let me examine it from a place like when I've stepped out of it and after my nervous system has calmed down and let me see if
Hmm.
there's a place where I can like, oh, let me give somebody the benefit of the doubt. And really try to like do the work and not in the moment. But if you look back in a moment and change your mind about it after your fight or flight system has calmed down, it doesn't make you wrong or bad. It makes you curious.
I love that. Yeah, I'd say the same thing. Is sit with that curiosity and know that we are so much more than the sum of our parts. And I don't mean to be all like cheesy, right? But like,
Right.
in my own life, the person I consider to be my mentor, on paper we are very, very different. He is a
Mm,
Unfortunately, he's a white man, and I tell that to his face of like, how in the world do I have a white man as a mentor? But ugh, it happens.
mm,
But exactly that. If we're looking for ways that we're different, it's easy. But so much easier is all the ways that we are
mm.
similar, because we are not the sum of our parts. We're so much greater.
Right. And not and like you said, like how can a white man? Because the fact of the matter is like in our society, in the United States, in the way that the hierarchy has been drawn and has been followed over generations and generations and centuries, is that in the United States, white men have held more power than any other person or group. And I think like
Sure.
that's the thing is that like when people hear that stuff and feel it's a threat instead of like understanding, like I see it. I have some privilege
Hmm.
as somebody who has converted to being, um, I assumed as a white man, like
I'll
I
say you're
am
kind of a white man, DJ.
right, and I am always aware of like I have to remember that people see me in a different way
Hmm.
than I was as a
Yeah.
lesbian who definitely didn't have a lot of privilege. When I was
Hmm.
outed as a lesbian all the time, and now I am as a white man. But the thing is that white men in itself aren't problematic. It's problematic when you don't understand that
Yeah.
just your existence has privilege and power. And like
Yeah.
you may feel that as a threat to you, but we're just saying that like that's just been the facts. And we hope that
Hmm.
you can see that we're not saying it makes you wrong or bad. And we're not saying that noting that like, that what you just said about white men is just that like,
Hmm.
hey, notice that people
Yeah.
respond to you in a certain way because they have felt that your power has dominated over them in one way, shape, or another. And whether you uh, feel like you've done that intentionally or not, it has happened, whether you like it or not.
Yeah, chances are I'll think you're a cardiologist if you're a white man, like statistically speaking.
That's right. That's right. There you go. Yes,
All right. Well, on that note, DJ, I think we've got a lot to think about. We got a lot of fun stuff to sit with, and we hope you, as the viewers, have sat with us and learned some things,
I hope
heard some things,
so.
and maybe
Mhm.
started to challenge a little bit of your own beliefs. But
That's right.
as always, we appreciate likes, comments, shares. Let people know you're listening. Let us know you're listening. We love to hear from folks and how you like the episode, what stood out to you, and what's something that you're rethinking, some dissonance that you're sitting with, some identity ruptures, and what you're doing with that. We'd love to hear from you, and we
Yeah.
will catch you next time on Let's Pick This Up next week. See you guys.
Bye.